really a privilege to be here at this very important conference, and I thank you for giving me a few minutes to just make some brief remarks. It's not enough to simply be against racism or to say that you are against racism. Token anti-racist statements in the modern United States are everywhere. Though Martin Luther King Jr. was shot down and killed for his brave, dedicated work, after his death, he has been reduced to a harmless, patriotic icon. Even though the FBI tried to destroy him, school children throughout the United States are now taught that MLK is proof that the United States is, quote, the greatest nation in the world. Well, the truth is, as most people here are aware, the United States is not a nation. The U.S. is a country, and within its borders are oppressed and oppressor nations. African Americans brought to this country in chains constitute an oppressed nation within U.S. borders. A lot of people in the U.S. like to say they are revolutionaries these days, Bernie Sanders and others. I say you're not a revolutionary unless you recognize that black people constitute a nation, and that as a nation they have the right to self-determination, to choose separation or integration for themselves. Every time I come to this part of the world, I meet so many young people who have a completely delusional portrait of the United States. What young Iranians see on satellite television, this image of the United States as a kind of rich paradise, this image of the United States is completely false. If you watch U.S. media, 90% of the time you're only seeing Southern California or New York City. But the United States is far bigger than that. In the heartland of the United States, what Sarah Palin demagogically called the real America, there are millions of young people who are very unhappy. The U.S. economy has been wrecked by deindustrialization. The steel mills, auto plants, and other good-paying industrial jobs have been eliminated. The public sector in teaching, libraries, post offices, and such has also been gradually eliminated. Young Americans in service sector jobs are stuck in a low-wage economy, making a mere fraction of what their parents made in the much-heralded American middle class that once existed. Young Americans watch the same garbage propaganda that is as what is broadcast into Iran, and they see how Kim Kardashian, the Real Housewives of New Jersey, and other wealthy people on American television live, and they then contrast it with their own lives. The rates of suicide, mental illness, and drug addiction among young Americans are rising. Young people in the United States are told that unless they are rich, they are worthless. And then they look into the future and see that they're going to spend their lives with a much lower income level than their parents and possibly spending it poorer than they expected. U.S. society, born in racism, slavery, and the slaughter of the indigenous people, is now entering a deep political and economic crisis. Now, what's true is not always obvious, but in some instances it is. And this is very obvious. The United States, in which there seems to be another mass shooting every time you turn around, is not a healthy, moral society. It's not a model or an ideal that any country should aspire to become. The most hopeful period in the history of the United States was the direct aftermath of the Civil War. The Civil War was really the Second American Revolution. Abraham Lincoln led a beautiful coalition. It included Christian abolitionists, labor unionists, industrial capitalists, and most importantly, the enslaved African people themselves. When the war broke out, enslaved African people stopped working in a general strike all throughout the South. Harriet Tubman became the first woman to lead U.S. soldiers into battle as she organized guerrilla bands freeing slaves along the Combahee River in South Carolina. The slaveocracy, aligned with the British Empire, was also supported by the Wall Street financial elite. They saw cotton exports from slave plantations as a way to make profits. But Wall Street, the British Empire, and the slave-owning aristocracy was defeated, and they were defeated by an amazing alliance. The Republican Party during the 1860s, far different than what it is today, was a revolutionary party. It took its name from the French Revolution. It represented the small farmers, the African Americans, and the labor unions. After defeating the slave owners, they continued to move ahead as a coalition. And for a brief period in the South, there was even land redistribution, where the land of the slave owners was being redistributed. Calling themselves the populists, the small farmers and free blacks called for public control of railroads, guaranteed education for all, and the overthrow of the monopolists, the wealthy bankers that have so much power. The progressive coalition that came out of the Civil War was broken apart by Wall Street. What did they use to destroy the progressive anti-capitalist mass movement that emerged in the aftermath of the Civil War? They used racism. The Ku Klux Klan used terrorist tactics very similar to what the Israelis are doing, very public, violent acts of terror with brutal violence, forcing the formerly enslaved persons out of political process. U.S. troops were pulled out of the South, and it was handed over to the racists. Since that time, the white people of the United States made a deal with Satan. As the big bankers have plundered the world, using bombs, sanctions, and cruise missiles to beat down those who assert their independence, we went along with it. We waved flags, we were loyal and obedient, and in exchange we got houses, cars, and TVs. We were taught to identify with Wall Street and to look at the people of the world, as well as the black and brown people within the United States, as our enemies. But the devil does not keep his promises. The middle class, the bribe given to white Americans to buy their obedience and loyalty to empire, is gradually being eliminated. The standard of living in the United States is rapidly dropping. The civil liberties often bragged about by U.S. leaders are being stripped away as the U.S. is gradually transitioning to becoming a low-wage police state. The U.S. economy has become centered on destruction. Prisons for profit, police on every corner, empty foreclosed homes, rampant aggression, and war around the world. As we face the ruins of U.S. society, now it is time for white people to change how they see themselves. We need to understand that the satanic cabal of bankers that has committed so many crimes around the world is also our enemy. The people of Iran, Venezuela, Russia, China, Palestine, Yemen, and anywhere else who are standing up and trying to break free from their system of global usury are our friends. A new revolutionary coalition must be forged, an alliance of those within U.S. borders who reject the rule of the globalist bankers and can function almost as a U.S. division of the global, gradually emerging axis of resistance. Every day, the U.S. government provides $18 million to the Israelis as they escalate their genocidal crimes and provocations. A mass people's movement could demand that the money instead be spent on providing health care, education, and jobs for the next generation of youth within the United States. The U.S. currently has thousands of troops stationed in military bases throughout this region. A mass people's movement could demand that instead these soldiers be brought home and put to work rebuilding the crumbling bridges and roads throughout the United States. The United States is currently facing very hard times. However, as has often been said in the past, hard times are fighting times. The moment is approaching when a real people's movement against the racist Wall Street financial elite, their wars, their racism, their police state, and their global system of usury and poverty can broadly expand within U.S. society. Such a people's movement will require unity of political forces, concrete political demands, and a clear vision of an entirely new society on the continent of North America. And as I end, I just wanted to touch on, we're constantly told in the U.S. to think of people who are fighting for their independence around the world as terrorists. But there's a real difference between a revolutionary and a terrorist. If you want to know what a terrorist is, go see the next Hollywood superhero movie. Right? What is the most American movie genres, these ideas of superheroes? What is it? It's a white man, usually, who thinks the police aren't doing enough. So what does he do? He puts on a mask and he goes out to fight the bad guys with isolated acts of violence. What is this? This is the Ku Klux Klan. That's what that is. That's the mentality that comes out of it. What the Israelis are doing, their violent attacks the settlers are carrying out, what ISIS is doing, what the police of the United States are doing, this is the terrorist method. Extreme acts of violence designed to terrify people. The Supreme Leader, Khamenei, when he says that they oppose the crimes of both Daesh and the police of the United States, that they're both the same, he's pointing to the fact that they are both using the terrorist method. But what's a revolutionary? A revolutionary is completely different than a terrorist. If you look at revolutionaries like Imam Khomeini, like Malcolm X, like Eugene Debs, these are people who weren't great because they committed isolated acts of violence and terrified people. They were great because they pushed people forward. They empowered people to do things they never believed that they were capable of doing. That's what the essence of revolutionaries are. The U.S. is facing a crisis, but it's also a time of great opportunity. I think the world is rapidly changing. The rule of the big bankers, the global elite that runs the United States is changing. There's an emerging axis of resistance in the world, and I think we're entering a period of great opportunity for those who seek justice, peace, and equality. Thank you.